The difference is there's no owner in the traditional sense, so no matter how well the company ever does, the directors can't take money out of it. We can't go, oh, we've got a brilliant year, we're going to take 20 grand out of it and go on a nice holiday. Any surplus that we make has to be reinvested in supporting and promoting our social aims, which are essentially about promoting cycling in Bristol. So the company was registered in September 2012. This place opened in July 2013, so we've been here for about 2.25 years now. We've obviously got the cafe down here, which in terms of turnover is about 75% of the business. Upstairs we've got the bike workshop, event space, so we service and repair bikes up there, host lots of events, cycling related and not. So that's what the place is all about. There are 15 of us who work here. Annual turnover is about 350k. Yeah, I mean, if you want to know anything else about the business, ask me afterwards. But what we want to talk about just for a few minutes now is how we raise the money to get started. So in order to open the business, we needed to raise about 120 grand. And that included a bit of money to set aside as working capital for the first few months, you know, in case sales were very slow to pick up. So the 120 grand came from a number of different sources. We were very fortunate with the timing that there was a grant scheme being run by Bristol City Council at the time, part of a national programme called the Local Sustainable Transport Scheme, so it was Department for Transport money. Bristol City Council got about £28 million from that big pot. They put about £2 million of that aside for what they termed the Active Neighbourhoods Transport Grant Scheme. So it's basically for community projects in Bristol promoting sustainable transport. And we managed to spin what we were doing in such a way that they thought we fit that bill. So we got £40,000 of non-repayable funding from the City Council, which was pretty mega, really, about a third of what we needed. A couple of other bits of non-repayable funding. We got a little grant from the School for Social Entrepreneurs. I was on their startup programme in 2012-13. That was £4,000. And perhaps the most interesting bit from this point of view was crowdfunding, which raised about £11,000 net. So we raised about 13 in total, but the cost of the exercise were about £2 grand. So all of those bits combined, 40k from the council, 4k from the School for Social Entrepreneurs, and 11 grand from our crowdfunding campaign, got us about halfway to where we needed to be. The remainder of the money came from loans from supportive individuals, and that includes me. My loan is on the same terms as all the other loans, which are shit. So essentially, what you would get if it was in a crappy high street bank account for 5 years but without any guarantees. But the crowdfunding campaign kind of opened up conversations with people. So in the crowdfunding campaign, the maximum level of donation that we asked for was £300, and there were a number of people who came forward through that campaign and said, we'd like to contribute more, how can we go about doing that? So I started having conversations with a few people who wanted to support the project to a larger tune than 300 quid, and a number of people, I think there are about nine people in total, including me and my wife, I should say. Obviously it's my money. So between those 9 people, loans of £60,000, ranging from 1,000 up to about 30,000. All those loans are repayable over 5 years, as I say, on not very favourable terms to the loan providers, so it's something that people have done for philanthropic reasons rather than to make any kind of financial return. I'm glad to say that we're about 3 years through the 5 years of repayments and we're well on track, so you know, it's kind of always uppermost in my mind that those people who showed faithfulness at the start should be repaid. But I suppose the interesting point about how those loans and indeed the crowdfunding campaign proved to be successful was that we ended up getting a load of financial capital off the back of social capital. So it was about having conversations with people, selling them the idea. So although we didn't go to any traditional banks funding. We have to put together a very detailed business plan, financial projections for the first 3 years and so on, so it was pretty well thought through, in large part due to James, who's standing over there. And in fact, he is a nice illustration of how social capital was very important in the genesis of this place, because I was at the Bristol Bike Project, which is our sister organisation up the road in Stokes Croft, about a week after having the idea for this place, and I was chatting to some people there about it, and James overheard that conversation and said, oh, that sounds interesting, maybe I could get involved in helping you with some business planning and stuff. And little did he know that 3.5 years later he'd be here working for free, very much enmeshed in it. So it's a nice illustration really of just the fact that this place wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have been just getting out and talking to people about it. And also, not just about this project, but even prior to thinking of this place, you know, I've done a lot of volunteering in bike-related projects around Bristol, met a lot of people through that stuff, all of whom were willing and able to help me when it came to trying to get this place off the ground. So it wasn't just a case of having an idea and starting rattling the tin and hoping that people would come forward. It was actually a lot of relationships that have been built up through kind of voluntary work and just getting involved in interesting stuff over the preceding sort of 4 or 5 years. All of that laid the groundwork really, so that when I did need help with stuff, there were people who were willing to come forward. I mean, another lovely example is in terms of actually getting the premises ready. We had over 500 person hours of volunteer help with painting and, you know, stripping walls and a bit of unskilled labouring, or even, well, skilled labouring actually for free. So it was a really, really lovely way of getting people involved in the place before it even opened. And obviously if people have invested something in it of themselves, they're much more likely to come back and spend the money in it once it's open, which I'm glad to say has proven to be the case. We've got a lot of regulars who we picked up as volunteers before they were ever customers. So I guess that's about it from me. Is that okay?
Perfect. So.